every second that we have spent. So please, let us be patient. We are doing this for the woman. We are doing this for our faith. And we are also doing this for our country. One day of investment, no matter how discomforting it could be, is something that is worth to put in to get a better deal from the government and from the society that we belong to. While we are waiting for the Vice President, we're happy to have in our midst our brother that is identifying with Islam not after he has got into position. You know, some people become more active Muslims after they have been appointed into positions. I'm talking about someone who was the youngest member of Oyo State House of Assembly in 1979. Having been a member of parliament at such a very tender age, he had become, he was at the time Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Oyo State. He has held a number of positions. He was a frontline leader of the Muslim Student Society of Nigeria at the then University of Ife. Currently, he serves as the Minister of Communication. Brothers and sisters in the Dean, let me invite our brother to say a few things while we are waiting for the Vice President. Is certainly, if you want a minister from Southwest that is a Muslim, is the first that will come into mind. I invite Barrister Abdurrahim Adebayo Shitu, Honorable Minister of Communication, to have a few words with us. Mr. Minister.
A'udhu billahi samil alim minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. It's a very big pleasure for me to be here in the midst of my brothers and sisters. I learned of this meeting earlier this morning, and at the time I learned of it, I was told it would be coming up tomorrow. So I was prepared to be part of it tomorrow. About 5 hours ago, I was told that the time has been brought forward. I therefore had to make my way from Ibadan to this place. I feel so happy and so proud that I'm a Muslim, and that I'm not just being a Muslim, that I've always been a Muslim. I am happy that I have some of my colleagues in the MSS of the then University of Ife. I can see some of them smiling already. Again, I had the privilege of being president during my second year in Ife, which was 1974-75 session. Having said that, we are here to discuss Islam and also to discuss about our country, Nigeria. We are lucky, I believe, that for once we have a government which has virtually succeeded in bridging the gap in the then existing dichotomy among Muslims and Christians. Today we have a president and a vice president who operates like twins. We have a president who, by all standards, is not only seen but also known to be a wonderful Muslim. Perhaps a better Muslim than me or than many of us here present, with due respect to everybody. On the other extreme, positive extreme, we also have a vice president who, very importantly, is a pastor of one of the largest churches in Nigeria. So when two positive things meet and work together, the result of it is the stability that we have in our country today. Starting with Mr. President, we know that on 3 previous occasions he had contested for the presidency and was said to have lost elections. He didn't lose hope, or he lost hope at the stage and regained hope in the future, which came in 2015. Eventually, as a result of the improvement in the electoral process, he won the election in a free and fair contest. Let me take you through the results of the elections in 2011, which was the last failed attempt at Buhari's effort to become president. In 2014, he vied under the platform of CPC, Congress for Progressive Change. Interestingly, I too contested under the same platform for in 2011. In that election, he scored less than 13 million votes. That is in 2011. He scored 12 million plus votes. In that same election, PDP was said to have scored 22 million votes. That is the gap of 10 million. But of the 13 million less votes, 12 million plus came from the 19 northern states, while less than 500,000 came from the 16 states of southern Nigeria. So I want us to keep that aside. In 2015, this man who scored less than 13 million votes in 2011 now scored 15 million votes, perhaps as a result of the fact that southern Nigeria contributed about 3 million votes. From the north, he still scored 12 million plus votes, which means 12 million plus votes has always been constant for Mr. President from northern Nigeria. On the other hand, PDP, which has scored 22 million votes, now scored in 2015, scored 12 million votes. That is a reduction of 10 million. If you analyze it very well and have a regard to the fact that the 2015 election is as judged as one of the best in the history of Nigeria, and it was also administered by the then PDP government in a situation where it is not possible for a party not in government at that time to have rigged that election. So the only explanation we have for the 10 million missed votes for PDP is that in previous elections it had always been rigged figures. That is clearly what we can deduce. So when some politicians make noise about a supposed attempt to rig in 2019, the question is, if APC didn't need to rig in 2015 before winning, and at a time they were not in power, why would they want to rig now before they win an election? Particularly that the Buhari government has a string of achievements, some of which I would enumerate in the course of my address. So I want to assure you that from what we can all deduce, I mean logically, nobody can rig the 2019 elections. If anybody will want to rig, it is certainly not Buhari's government. And I tell you one of the reasons why I reached that conclusion. In the course of campaigns, we knew that there was no money for the electioneering campaigns. In fact, I once asked Rotimi Amechi, the Director General, where we were going to get money for the campaigns. And he told me, if you ask Mr. President that question, I am sure he will have no answer for you. And that's exactly what it is. And Mr. President also told us in a cabinet meeting that no member of cabinet must make an attempt to dip his hand into the treasury of the government for the purpose of getting money for the campaigns. So I want to assure you that nobody can rig, and Mr. President will certainly, from his antecedents, not support any attempt by anybody to rig. In 2015, when campaigns were on, the APC government, the APC party, hinged its campaign and appeal for votes on three main planks. The first is that it was going to fight insurgency, particularly in the northeast and also in south-south and other areas. Secondly, it committed itself to fighting against corruption if it got into power. And thirdly, it pledged to repair the Nigerian economy. I'll take each of these to analyze whether or not there have been achievements in each of these. On the first issue of fighting insurgency, before the Buhari administration came on board, Boko Haram was in firm control of 14 local government areas in 3 states of the northeast. That means that in the 14 local government areas, the Boko Haram had driven out members of the police force, Nigerian police. They had driven out soldiers. They had driven out local government officials. They had uprooted all insignia of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and they had driven out residents of the 14 local government areas into IDP camps. People lived in IDP camps for upwards of 10 years because the Nigerian government at that time appeared to be very helpless and very incompetent at challenging the takeover of these 14 local government areas by Boko Haram. When the Buhari administration came on board, within a year, it retrieved or recovered or liberated these 14 local government areas from the control of Boko Haram. That means up till this moment, none of these local government areas is in the control of Boko Haram as it used to be. And it also means all the insignia of the federal government have been restored. Now there are policemen in all of these local government areas. Now there are local government officials in all of these local government areas. Now soldiers have taken control and Boko Haram has been driven out of those 14 local government areas. Furthermore, the millions of people in IDP camps dotted around liberated areas have now been resettled back to their homes. Today we no more have IDP camps in any part of the Southwest. People are back to their normal lives. You would agree with me that this is not a mean feat. One of the things which happened at the twilight of the former government was the fact that the Borno State Governor, Shetima, had raised an alarm along the line that he believed that Boko Haram was better equipped in terms of military ammunition and arms than members of the Nigerian armed forces. And the then government denied it, said it was raising an unnecessary and baseless alarm. Weeks after, the then president took a bill to the National Assembly for approval to spend $1 billion for purpose of buying arms and ammunition to equip the armed forces in their fight against Boko Haram. The approval was promptly granted by the National Assembly. Unfortunately, not a kobo out of this $1 billion was used to purchase a single gun. The monies upon approval were simply withdrawn by the Jonathan administration and shared among the top elite of the government at that time, both the politicians among them and those who were the military top shots. And that is why today you find many of these military leaders in the government facing prosecution in various courts. Interestingly, this will take us to the issue of fighting corruption. President Jonathan, as he then was, wrote a book which was launched a few months ago. In that book, he said, and I quote him, during his regime, the EFCC recovered 20 billion naira from corrupt government officials. He said, but in Buhari's regime, over the last 3.5 years, the EFCC has recovered 400 billion naira. And he says, in his logic or otherwise, he said that means there's more corruption during Buhari's era than during his own era. And the question to ask is, from which officials were these 400 billion recovered? It's from officials who participated in his government. You can check this from his book, which was published about 3 months ago. So that leads us to the issue of the fight against corruption. For once we have a president in this country who started his regime by cutting by half his salary. When he came on board, he said he does not need 100% of his salary, that he will only take 50% of it. You agree with me that that 100% is halal money for Mr. President. It's halal. If he took it, it will be in order. It will be legitimate. It will be lawful. But he said he doesn't need all of that money. So when he announced that he was cutting his salary by half, the vice president also took after him and also reduced his own salary by half. So both the president and the vice president have reduced their legitimate income by half. But that's not the end of it. Again, Mr. President, as a retired general and a retired head of state, is entitled to pension. As a retired general, he's entitled to pension. But Mr. President, General Buhari, said his conscience will not allow him to be taking two incomes from the same government. To be taking pension from the same federal government and also be taking the salary of president. So he decided to step down one. So now he takes only that 50% salary, and for his pension he donated it for the time that he would be president. Again, that has never happened before. I don't know in any part of the world where you have this scenario playing out. We have talked of what the former president said of the anti-corruption crusade by the president. Before the president came on board, there was an idea by the then PDP government of a policy called TSA, Treasury Single Account, which was then introduced by the former Minister of Finance, Dr. Okonjo-Iweala. But the PDP government did not allow that policy to be introduced or implemented, because they knew that if that policy was implemented, it will block all leakages to which they are beneficiaries. When General Buhari came on board, from day one, he decided to fully implement TSA, such that today, no government ministry, department or agency operates any of its accounts in any commercial bank. Under the old system, a ministry may have 20 different accounts, and even the political head of the ministry may be aware of the existence of only 5 or 6 or 10, and government officials use those other accounts in connivance with bank officials to siphon government resources. All of that has been abolished. Again, that is another evidence of a sincere fight against corruption. I am aware that over the last 3.5 years, apart from the 400 billion which President Jonathan confirmed this government to have recovered, we know that there are several cases and several prosecutions which are ongoing in various courts across the land. Several of them. From Jonathan's wife alone, more than 10 billion naira has been recovered. More than 10 billion naira has been recovered by EFCC from Jonathan's wife. I'm sure, but for the respect that government has for the office of Mr. President, from Jonathan himself, a lot more could have been, recovered. So everybody knows that as of today, the fear of EFCC is the beginning of wisdom. So for those who claim that the fight against corruption is one-sided, is an analogy that can be given is when thieves are arrested. Would it be a legitimate defense for one thief to seek to nullify the justification for his own arrest on the basis of a supposed stealing by another thief? Certainly that cannot be. And in any case, people who have not had opportunity of being in government before this government could not have had an opportunity to steal, even if they wanted to steal. So I want to assure us that the fight against corruption is an ongoing one which is being successfully and effectively being implemented. On the issue of repairing the economy, we do know that before this government came on board, on all federal roads for 2 years before Buhari came on board, there had been stoppage of work on all federal roads across the country. The last budget of the PDP government on roads, as an example, the budget for 200,000 kilometers of road, federal roads, was 19 billion naira. I am aware that not a kobo out of this 19 billion was used for any road because contractors on all of these roads had abandoned work and laid off their workers across all the federal roads. In 2017 alone, Buhari invested 275 billion naira on federal roads in 1 year. Compare 275 billion to 19 billion which was budgeted by the PDP government. I am happy, and I'm happy that most of us who travel out of Lagos would know that on most federal roads, contractors had been brought back to site. All those laborers and workmen and tradesmen who had been laid off have been sent, brought back, and work is ongoing, such that in each of the 36 states of the Federation, there's work going on at least one federal road in each of the states of the Federation. Number two, the last cost of selling fuel before Buhari came on board, petroleum at the international market was selling for $140 per barrel. $140 per barrel. And Nigeria is producing 2.2 million barrels a day. So to know how much was coming into our coffers as a nation, you multiply 2.2 million barrels by $140. And then when you change that into naira, you know the trillions of naira that Nigeria acquired over that long period. The question to ask them, what was all the quantum of monies used for? Were they saved? The answer is no, because Iweala protested at that time when governors insisted that there shouldn't be any savings. They wanted their money. They were really at the verge of going to court before the monies were shared. And these monies which were shared were simply frittered away no investment on road, no investment on railways, no creation of jobs, and all of that. As if by a conspiracy. By the time Buhari came on board, the price of petroleum at the international market had plummeted to about $24 per barrel. From $140, it went down to about 24. Again, on the quantum of petroleum we were producing, insurgency in the South at a stage had also reduced petroleum output of Nigeria to about 800,000 barrels, from 2.2 million to 800,000. So it was double jeopardy for Nigeria, and that was the time Buhari came on board. So the fact that within 6 months of Buhari coming on board, Nigeria recovered from the state of near jeopardy, complete jeopardy, is a miracle that must be credited to Almighty Allah and credited to Mr. President. In history, we have, as of today, federal civil servants numbering only 1.5 million. In all of Nigeria's existence, in no 1 year has any government created up to 50,000 jobs in one fell swoop. I am happy and proud to say that under N-Power alone, N-Power, 500,000 new jobs were created for graduates. I'm sure if many of us don't have our children participating in it, we will have at least relatives participating in N-Power. Again, because Nigeria was a mono economy, we were relying only on petroleum resources as our income. This president decided on diversifying the Nigerian economy, and the diversification started from the agri sector. Before the government came on board, we do know that rice is the staple food of all tribes in Nigeria. 90% of the rice being consumed in Nigeria was being imported from Thailand. When Buhari came, he said, we must put a stop to it. I'm happy, and I believe all of us know, that as of today, only 10% of rice being consumed in Nigeria is imported. Only 10%. From 90% to 10%. Consequently, 8 million new jobs in the agri sector alone have now been created by this government. Do I consider? I thought you give me 2 more hours. So, government has been able to create 8 million new jobs. And some of the symptoms of these new jobs is the fact that from rice farming communities, people are building new houses, people are buying cars and motorcycles, people are going more on Hajj now, and interestingly, more wives are being engaged by these new millionaire farmers. Again, that is a sure way of ensuring that the Nigerian economy is getting improved by the government. Maybe I should go and sit down at this stage. I therefore want to assure you that this is one government which undoubtedly is committed to ensuring a revival of the Nigerian economy, that is committed to ensuring a strong and effective fight against insurgency, and that is also committed to fighting against corruption, because of Mr. President's belief that if we do not kill corruption, corruption is most likely to kill Nigeria. We therefore all have a duty. When you have a workman who is diligent in his work, the proper thing is for the employer of that labor to continue to renew the terms of conditions, to renew the employment of that. I want to remind us, all of us here, that all of us are part employers of labor for whoever would be president. And with this record of achievements, which is yet to be surpassed by any previous, record in the past, I believe that all of us would want to renew the appointment of Mr. President and that of his vice. I want to thank you most sincerely for this opportunity. I hope before I leave, this Ummah would try and pay my bill for the near 1 hour that I've been asked to speak. Thank you so much.
You are free to clap. You are free to clap. I'd like to thank the Honorable Minister. I wish the President was listening to you. You have done a better job of communicating the achievements of this government than what we have had in recent times. And when you have someone who has a very letter combination, a lawyer, a politician, a minister of communication, what else do you expect? We thank Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, Honorable Minister, you are asking for 1 hour, for payment for 1 hour, right? Okay. In the absence of the VP, now you're standing for the hard talk. Now time to ask the Honorable Minister a question. Please come and take your seat. Yes. Please sit down. Now this is the time to fire him. Please sit down. Sit down. You walk into my trap. You walk into my trap. Now is the minister in charge of communication. MTN, Airtel, what's their names? Glow, Namobile. They charge you anyhow. Do you have questions for the Honorable Minister? And please make it as hard as you could. Don't spare him. Anyone? Alaji Ebiti.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Well, okay, the Honorable Minister is a friend, is a brother, and I know him very well. But frankly, communication in this country has not been the best. And I want to ask you, people are talking about 5G now. 5G. If I take my MTN phone out now, it's still 2G or 3G or 4G, but I don't get the 4G because it's a speed thing. Maybe Airtel is managing to do this. Then I don't get service. I get a lot of drop calls. I get a lot of interference. The question is, what is value for money for Nigerians, given that the investment requirement and the market are very extensive? Thank you.
Okay. I saw a hand there. Okay. And I'm in charge now. Your answer has to be brief, Honorable Minister. Otherwise, you start paying me. Your time start counting from now. 60 seconds.
A lot of times when I am asked questions, particularly with the press, I am always very cautious in answering, because one is torn between telling the truth as a statesman and get knocks or trying to satisfy the public as to what they want to hear. I, as Minister of Communications, I thank God that but for if I had been deployed to say the Ministry of Work, a lot of my friends would have been very happy. They know I would most probably get money and so on from contractors and so on. But I would not have known what I would be missing from being in the communications industry. Communications, we do know. Time was when Nigeria had less than 500,000 lines for a country of more than 120 million at that time. We then decided to key into the ICT revolution by asking international investors to come and invest in GSM services. To the best of my knowledge, Nigeria is the only country where investors will come, bring all their money to acquire licensing, which runs into billions of naira, install their masts and all the equipment that they would need, and also have to procure on a daily basis their own electricity far away from the national grid or otherwise than from the national grid. In all other countries, operators rely on the electricity supply, which is the cheapest, through the national grid. In Nigeria, I'm aware that each mast, for instance, apart from the cables from one location to the other, a mast costs about 40 million naira. When you have had, maybe in Lagos, a company may need about 500 masts. You multiply that by 40 million. And then the cost of, laying cables, and the cost of procuring right of way and all of that. And yet, you also now have to acquire 200 kVA generators for each mast. Again, that is not enough. You also have to get fueling to run those generators for 24 hours. On the other hand, if any of us use the SMS service, is 4 naira per message. If you go to Benin Republic, which is very nearby, for the same thing that you pay 4 naira here, you pay 50 naira from Benin Republic. In some countries, you pay between 100 and 150 naira. Which makes me to conclude that the cost of services in Nigeria is perhaps the cheapest throughout the world. Of course, in Britain and US, they do have contract services where when you pay for certain services, you get others free. But talking of all the countries that have had the privilege of attending, that is the situation. The duty of this private sector, the duty of government, is really not to engage in business. And that is why NITEL was sold. Because government believes that government has no business in business. So it is left for the private sector to look for funding for all of this. We have had challenges of securing a lot of these equipments, telecoms equipments. We have heard of several guards in some of these masts who are being tied to the stake and equipments being, watched over, being, cannibalized and taken away. So there are several challenges that I'm aware that these operators face. We had to set up through NCC, which is the regulator, machinery to ensure that all those who have complaints against any of these GSM companies make appropriate report, whether with regard to drop calls or with regard to unsolicited text messages. And I want to assure you that 2017 was declared as the year of the telecoms consumers. And before the end of that year, we had a reduction in complaint of more than 70%. That is to assure you that while government does not have business in the business of telecom operators, we have been pursuing, ensuring that they improve on the quality of service which they are bound or obligated to, work on. So I want to assure you that this is work in progress. Government will continue to provide supervision and monitoring and regulation to ensure improvement in the quality of service by operators.
Okay, I can see many hands. While I will take a few more questions, let me apologize one more time for the delayed commencement of the main menu. Again, I appeal to us when I see people like our father Alaji Saliu and I see our mother Alaji Ashopeyi and they are still here waiting. It does mean that the issues are important. We need to invest this time, and I'm pleading with us. We're in constant communication with the Vice President, and it's also pleading that we should wait. He's somewhere in Ikoyi. He will join us soon. Please, let us make this investment of time. He will soon be through there, and he will join us here. So I'll take the second question.
Okay, assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, my question is very basic. So the first one is, we all know of mobile money, and we know financial inclusion is actually key to poverty alleviation and some other things. So I want to ask, because I'm a youth, so I'm looking at the future. So is there any plan by NCC to allow telecom to operate mobile money in Nigeria? If no, because I know the stand of NCC and CBN is no. Why the no stand? Why? Thank you.
You want to take this now?
Well, mobile money is a legitimate business which is also subject to license. I'm aware that there are 2 or 3 companies already working to get licensed and deploy mobile money services. So it is legitimate and it is allowed, but it has to come from the private sector. Government does not have any business in business, so government is not going to do it as its own. But having said that, I also want to assure you that we are trying to bring some reform and restructuring to NIPOS. In NIPOS, we know what NIPOS was used to doing. We are trying to create 5 new companies. We will be having NIPOS Banking and Insurance Company, NIPOS Property and Development Company, NIPOS Transport and Logistics Company, NIPOS E-Commerce Services Company, and NIPOS E-Government Services Company. Virtually all of these would also have components of mobile money as, business component of these new entities. I want to assure you that maybe in another 2 months, we will be able to roll out these new companies, and they would be able to apply mobile money, because mobile money is a software that the private sector operators would have to engage in. It is not for the government. All that the government would need to do is to license those who would operate it. Thank you.
Okay. Sisters, okay, after this gentleman, I will take the sisters.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yes, I'm surprised that the minister is the marketing person for the private operators. He has analyzed how these people go through very difficult time to provide services to us. I feel that one of the things that ministers should tell us is, okay, now these people have high cost of doing business in Nigeria. Do we have a plan, or did your ministry have a plan of reducing cost of doing business, particularly in communication area? That is one. Two, I don't know whether these private operators are beyond laws, beyond regulations, laws in this country. There was a time that your maybe NCC set a standard that, okay, for every 4 calls, Nigeria will not pay, or if they pay, these companies should refund. I've not had any of such, that it has happened, and I'm waiting for one day this will happen. Thank you.
2 questions in one.
Number one, I started by raising the dilemma that people in government would have in answering questions relating to private operators. But I believe that we as a government invited the private sector to come and invest. If we did that because we were not capable of providing that service ourselves, and after they have paid through their nose for the government, we owe a duty to maintain some balance between the interests of the ordinary man and that of the operators. So much as it is proper for me to champion and protect the interests of the consumer, I must not be unfair, because I felt that there's need for the public, particularly an enlightened public as we have here. With regard to the issue of whether they are made to pay for drop calls and all of that, I have not made any complaint. I don't know whether you have anybody who has made a complaint to NCC using the dedicated line. They will be in the best position to know what service they have gotten from NCC. But I do believe that it is for government to maintain a situation where both the public, which are customers, and the operators are all able to manage to live together. I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, MTN ran foul of the regulation on registering SIM cards. Before MTN came, the law had been for every single SIM card that is not registered, the operator will pay 200,000 naira. At the time the law was made, or the regulation was made, nobody could have imagined that one company would be in default of unregistered SIM cards to the tune of 5.2 million SIM cards. Nobody could have imagined. So the tendency will be to just look at 200,000. It is easy to pay. But when it was calculated and the cost went to trillions of naira, they made an appeal to government. I was not involved, to assure you that I didn't benefit from what happened. They made an appeal to the president to say, look, if we have to pay this amount, we are likely to go broke. If we go broke, we will pack our bags and baggages out of Nigeria. And these will be the consequences. There will be loss of jobs. The banking sector would be affected. Services would also be affected. The president, therefore, had to reduce the cost of the fine to 1/3 of what they were initially supposed to pay. So that is one type of intervention which government will go out of its way in order to create economic and social equilibrium within the system. So directly to your question as to whether you have not heard, I am not sure that those who make complaints, if they get satisfactory response, whether they will announce it to the public, I'm not sure. Except you have an individual who had made complaint appropriately and is able to come and tell us what exactly the response it got from NCC. But I want to assure you that that law, that guideline remains on in the books.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Let's go to the women's side.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sir, I thank you very much for coming to this room. As a mother, I'm always worried about the graduates that are coming out and they are not seeing jobs to do. Please, I want you to have an answer to that question.
Unemployment.
The issue of jobs, I'm sure every parent here has a son or a daughter who is at home jobless. The problem is beyond the government, if I must confess. The whole civil servants of the federal government of Nigeria, they are only 1.5 million. These extra 500,000 through N-Power is an additional burden which government took upon itself to ensure that at least we start from somewhere. I know it is a tip of the iceberg. I think what government is trying to do is to improve on infrastructure. Number one, get all roads, particularly federal roads, and there are about 200,000 kilometers of such roads. Get them all put in proper shape. Number two, on electricity. When this government came on board, electricity was only 3,000 megahertz, despite the $16 billion expended by the former President Olusegun Obasanjo on electricity. As I'm talking to you now, we have 7,000 megahertz. In another 2 years, we will add another 3,000 megahertz from Mambila electricity project, which will soon be completed. And so we will have 10,000 megahertz, which should be enough for us. So a number of infrastructures are being put in place in the hope that once this infrastructure are all over the place in a stable and reliable way, the private sector will be able to develop. Again, we have seen over the last 3.5 years that the agricultural sector is a limitless opportunity for Nigerians to go into. Because there is nothing that we produce in Nigeria that does not have a ready market waiting for it to be exploited. So I believe that all our governments, particularly in an election period like this, we should put all people who come to seek for our vote, we should put them to task as to what they want to do specifically to provide an enabling environment for new jobs to be created. As for government, it is not possible to, for instance, multiply, its employees to double it to 3 million. Even if we double it to 3 million, it still will not fully address the issue of unemployment and joblessness, particularly by graduates. A lot of things are wrong with us in Nigeria. Our perception is also there. A lot of people will come to me and say they want to work in NCC. Somebody who does not have a job at all, he wants to dictate where he wants to work because he believes NCC pays much more than many others. And I always tell them that what is important is half a loaf is better, than nothing. What we should try and do is let us take, to task, people who come to seek for our votes so that we will force them to think deeply as to what type of environment would they be able to create to encourage the creation of new jobs. But like I said, even for negotiations, some form of agreement would also be available. For instance, through the school feeding program, 9.2 million school children eat 1 egg a day, each of them. It means 9.2 million eggs are being consumed by school children in government schools in 26 states. So for anybody who decides to start a poultry and produce eggs, you know that there's a ready market waiting for you. I'm sure some people have taken advantage of it. For the rest of us, we must try and think deeply as to the areas that we can invest in so that we'll be able to create jobs. Government can certainly not create jobs for everybody. What government can and must do is to provide the enabling environment for the private sector to be able to, start businesses. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. My question is on NIPOST. And I don't want NIPOST to die a natural death, just like Nigerian Airways. I want you to re-strategize to emulate DHL and other courier services. Because nowadays, people do patronize courier services, DHL. Even the luxurious buses, people send parcels through them. So if you re-strategize, then you can emulate these courier businesses so that NIPOST will not die a natural death. You need to re-strategize. Thank you.
Well, I am happy I told you that we are trying to restructure NIPOST. We are trying to do this to make it operate like a commercial entity with diverse services to be provided. Currently, KPMG has been consulted. They are working on the structuring of the 5 new companies, which when they finish, they will get the 5 companies registered with the CAC, and then we'll be able to roll out. I can assure you that even now, NIPOST is doing much better than they were doing 4 or 5 years ago. I can assure you about that. But you see, you mentioned DHL. Nigerians, if they want the quality of service that DHL provide, if they want it to be provided by NIPOS, certainly there will be increase in the cost of services. More often than not, when services are offered by government, most Nigerians expect it to be free of charge. But people have to be paid for the services they provide, and so at the appropriate time, we will do the needful. I will assure you anyway that we will work towards providing better service at a cost much lower than what DHL would, ask you to pay. Thank you.
We will wait for the brothers to finish their lecture. Okay. Thank you. One more time. We salute the Muslim Teachers Association of Nigeria, Mutan, who have come all the way from Ogun, Oyo, and Ekiti, and who are still here. We also thank the Ibadan Muslim professionals who also traveled down from Ibadan to be part of this event. We thank you most sincerely. You won't go back empty-handed. So please, let's tarry a while. Let's be patient. I know this is tasking, but then we have to go through this at the service of our nation, and particularly our dean. Doctor, you have passed your question. Okay.
Honorable Minister, sir. Good evening, sir. You said something about rice production, that Nigeria now imported about 10%. Now, let us be realistic and face reality. People that are here, that are from Ogun State or Lagos State, practically go to our markets. What brand of rice do we have in our market? The type of rice we have in our market in Nigeria today, they are foreign rice. Yes, we have foreign rice in our markets today. All the markets in Ogun State, in Lagos, even the lake rice between Lagos State and Kebbi, where is it? That is number one. Number two, I discovered something, that government activities are being underreported. This is communication ministry. We have Ministry of Information. Before the advent of this government, APC was very, very active in propaganda. They are very good at it. Now when they assume leadership, no report of government activities. And somebody told me it's because they didn't perform well. They have nothing to show. That's why they could not perform. So why the government activities? Because most things we are hearing now, they have done this, they have done that. But beautiful things. But all this while, we never had most of this things being reported. Why?
I know you are not minister in charge of agriculture. Neither are you in charge of information. But please respond very briefly to the two questions.
Well, I am here, and I want to believe that people who know me know that if I'm not as good as General Buhari in the area of integrity, I will be close to him. I have no cause to come and tell you lie here. I am telling you, you are aware that government banned rice by land importation. Today, no rice, except it is smuggled, is coming through the semi-border or through the other borders. It is only imported. And if you have been watching network news regularly, every now and then the customs department makes seizures. the rice we produce today, it is possible that Nigerians who will not bring themselves to the level of eating local rice, locally produced rice, because some psychological, misjudgment, would always look for foreign rice. But one thing I saw on television about 6 months ago, the producers of rice in Thailand, when the rice economy in Thailand collapsed, they came to Nigeria to plead that we allow them to come and set up rice mills in Nigeria so that they can be patronized. Thailand was exclusively exporting to Nigeria. Today, that has stopped. Anybody who would eat foreign rice now would have to pay exorbitantly, because coming through the sea border, they will have to pay custom duties and all sorts of duties. I am re-emphasizing, and again, if you are very conversant with the news, the Rice Millers Association, the rice growers, they came to the president on the solidarity visit and claimed that they are now 12 million membership, and pledged that all of those 12 million members would vote for Mr. President on account of the rice revolution. So I want to assure you that the fact that some people go to the market and find, foreign rice does not deny from the fact that today Nigerians are producing, a majority of Nigerians are consuming locally produced rice. Even in Ebonyi, a lot of rice is now being, grown in Ebonyi, and new rice mills are springing up. So I want you to be assured that the facts that I'm giving you can never be untrue, because there's no basis for me, nothing to fear for me to now, try to tell lies. Sorry. You talk of the lake rice. If you really live in Lagos and you hear about lake rice and you have doubt about whether there's indeed a lake rice, I think the simple thing to do is to go to the Minister of Agric, Lagos State Minister of Agric, to find facts. All that I know is that this lake rice was properly launched by both the Kebbi State Governor and Governor Ambode in an open televised ceremony. The other issue you mentioned about the fact that we are underreported now, I had mentioned it, we had exchanged ideas about it. Most of what I said today during my presentation, I am sure most people were hearing of them for the first time. But these are truths. It is true that we are underreported. We are aware of that, and we are trying to make amends. I can assure you that this government has been performing all that we say they are performing. For instance, if I tell you that we have 500,000 N-Power graduates working now, earning 30,000 per month, would anybody want to doubt that? If I tell you that 9.6 million or 9.2 million children are eating 1 meal a day in 26 states, would anybody who wants to doubt you should simply go to either the Ministry of Education or any of the government schools around. Cooks who have been so employed are 96,000 cooks employed to prepare food. You cannot imagine the other related services, those selling pure water, those selling plastic bowls, those selling plastic spoons, and even the taxi drivers who help to transport the food on a daily basis to the schools. All of them have become more engaged than they ever were. So as to our being underreported, we will do our best to improve on our reportage of the achievements of this government. Thank you.
The last two questions, and we will allow the minister to take a seat because we are having a comfort that our guest is on his way. I will confirm that soon. Two questions. Number one, what effort is government making to ensure digital inclusiveness, especially in areas of internet access, local content for software professionals and hardware manufacturers, and establishment of specialized university for information technology and allied areas? That's the first question. And I think you should answer this, then I'll ask the second question.
Digital inclusion, local content. On local content, government has a local content policy, which is to ensure that at least 40% of procurements are locally sourced. The NITDA, which is one of the agencies under the Ministry of Communications, is supervising this. Any procurement by government, we make sure that at least 40% of it are locally sourced. I think, people in the industry will really be the best to give an attestation of what government has been doing on this. With regard to digital inclusion, various agencies under the ministry, including the ministry itself, is building a lot of knowledge centers. We call them knowledge centers in various secondary schools across the country. And then in universities also, a lot of information labs are being provided at the expense of government. So I know that we do have a Digital Africa Council, which is working as a collaboration between government and private sector operatives to ensure digital inclusion. Again, in the area of broadband penetration, which also aids digital inclusion, we are making sure that by the grace of God, within the next 3-4 months, we have solar-based mast system. Solar-based masts will be in all the rural areas to ensure that the areas which are either non-served or underserved all are linked up to the digital connectivity. So I want to assure you that government is not resting on its laurels to ensure digital inclusion, because there cannot be digital inclusion without there being broadband penetration all across the length and breadth of the country. So we are working very hard at it. Thank you. MC, where is it?
I think the Honorable Minister for Communication deserves a round of applause for a job well done. He has helped us to fill in the gaps in his money, and I would like to thank him most sincerely. At this point, may we, the leadership of LEMO, will go and receive His Excellency the Vice President. Hello? I told you that the vice president will come, and we have seen movement in that direction. The Honorable Minister of Communication has filled in the gap in the last 1 hour or so, and has done creditably very well. Another man who is making history in the areas of revenue generation was someone who was chairman of Lagos Internal Revenue Service and is now the chairman of Federal Internal Revenue Service, who is raking a lot of money for the federal government of Nigeria to prosecute some of the laudable projects of this government. Put your hands together as a family welcome Mr. Babatunde Fowler, Chairman, Federal Inland Revenue Service. I also understand if you are in need of visa to Canada, there is one man here who can give you the visa. Nigeria High Commissioner to Canada, Mr. Ade Ashekun, is also here. Please show your face to the man is just wearing a shirt, but inside that shirt he can give you Canada visa. While we are still waiting for Vice President, I am going to invite the Chairman of Federal Inland Revenue Service to speak for a window of 5 minutes on a number of issues. Voluntary asset declaration. What has he done to be able to increase the revenue generation? We hear about 800,000 tax defaulters. Mr. Babatunde Fowler is on turn hard talk. Please join me here. Yeah. Encourage you with a round of applause. No, let me do voluntary chair doubling. Voluntary chair doubling. Please get me one more chair. I need one more chair. You know, the man is making so much money for government, nothing should happen to him. I don't want to take any risk. Please sit down now. You have been looking for this man, aren't you? Now time to fire him hard talk. Who's going to fire the first half? It must be a hard question. Very, very hard question. Oh, come. You again? And as you are coming here, please bring your tax identification number and your tax clearance certificate. Tax identification number.
Good evening, sir. First of all, I want to appreciate your efforts. And we heard it several times that you've made trillions of naira. Am I right? Fine. That's very good. Now, with trillions of naira, why is the federal government of Nigeria still complaining of lack of funds? What do you do with the money you have made so far for the government? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. There's one thing that I'd like everybody to understand. The money generated by the FRS is divided between the federal, state, and local governments. The federal government only receives 52% of that fund. Right now, out of the 36 states, 30 states rely 90% from that allocation. So all the money doesn't go to the federal government. Secondly, the amount invested in infrastructure is a record amount, and I'm sure that the VP will give you more details. So certainly, we still need more revenue to deliver on the mandate and the promises of this present government.
Okay. One question from stockbrokers.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fowler. Sorry, good evening. We've lost, I will be here this afternoon. My question is on minimum tax. The economy is going through some re-engineering, so we're all feeling the pinch. And as a result, many companies are not making profits, and those that are making profits are making marginal profits. Now, minimum tax says even if you are making losses, you should still pay tax. So some calculation will be done based on your turnover, some based on your assets, and I think about 4 criteria, and then they will pick one and you have to pay. Now, if you are making losses and you pay tax, you're actually paying from your capital. So what it means is that after some time, your capital will be eroded. I don't think this is in the best interest of the country, especially when you consider the fact that companies that have foreign investors are exempted from this tax. So why are we punishing Nigerians and then, foreigners just coming here, making money, and then they are leaving?
Let me give some background on the minimum tax. If our tax system was working properly, there'll be no need for it. But anytime laws are made in the interest of the general public. If we look at the VAT, we have less than a 15% level of compliance. If we look at CIT, most of us will know that most corporate organizations do not declare the correct figures. So the only way to go about that in the general interest of everybody is to have what you call minimum tax. We also have minimum tax when companies do not keep accurate records. To give you an idea, in the last 18 months, we've added over 1.2 million corporate bodies not in the tax net. For those who have bank accounts, we started a review of those that have annual turnover of 1 billion naira a year. We found out over 3,000 had no tax ID, paid no tax. We took it down to 100 million. Currently, with the review that we have over 45,000 not paying any tax. So yes, maybe 1 or 2 organizations who are not making profit will suffer minimum tax. But in the interest of all, that law says that if you're in business for a number of years and the whole objective is to make profit, I don't think most people will be in business for 10 years incurring losses and will not go out of that business. So the idea of the minimum tax is because of the poor record keeping, the high level of non-compliance, and I believe that going forward in the next year or 2, I'm sure we'll be in a position to cancel minimum tax.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir. No, mine is not related to tax, but it's unemployment. We thank the federal government, for the goodies to the workers of Nigeria with the minimum wage. But what is worrisome to me is that the ILO statistics say 2.3 million deaths occurs every year from occupational injuries and fatalities at work. In Nigeria, we don't have the statistics. It goes to about 6,000 per day death. And in some references, they even mentioned that war kills more than war. But the worrisome thing is that we have occupational safety and health that is so obsolete. What we have in this country is what the colonial master has left. We continue changing it. I know in 1999, we worked so much to produce one, and the bill has been residing in, being passed from one assembly to another. It is still in the 8th assembly. Please, we need a very robust occupational safety and health in Nigeria to protect the workers. We are talking of unemployment, and those employed are being maimed and killed and getting sick at work. So government should please take necessary action on speeding the passing of the occupational safety and health bill for this country so that we can protect our workers. Thank you.
Do you want to take this, or you want to call a friend, Chris Ngige? Do you want to take this yourself, or you want to call a friend? And I suggest Chris Ngige.
Well, I'll try and take this, and if I don't provide the correct answer, my honorable minister is here to assist. Now, there are a number of bills in the House, meaning in the House of Representatives and the Senate. The executive is limited by what the House does. But I'll take this message on, and I'm sure I'll also inform the Vice President when he gets here to try and talk to them. But at this current time, most of them are involved in politics. So if this assembly does not pass it, I'm sure the next assembly will pass it. And I'm sure also the unions are very interested in doing this. But I would also like to inform you that at the state level, there are certain laws that can also be enacted. I'm quite aware that the Lagos State government has a safety department that goes around and checks this. So pending when the federal government will be in position to have a law passed, I'm sure respective states can also do this.
I'm going to give you a bonus of 2 minutes to say anything you like about your agency, about yourself, and it's going to be tax-free. Your 2 minutes start from now. Your organization, anything you like to say, 2 minutes start from now.
Is it tax-free? Okay. 2 minutes to talk about my organization. My organization is a service-oriented organization. It's a service that has changed its vision. It's a service that believes that every additional naira generated will improve the standard of living of all of us. I would just like to appeal for those who may not be paying the correct amount of taxes to please come forward and do so. I often preach, if you have an elected leader who has the best vision, without money, that vision remains a dream. So let us put hands together, let us save lives, let us build Nigeria, and let us make Nigeria the Nigeria of our expectations and our dreams. Thank you.
I will send my bill to you later. I will also contain VAT. Thank you so much. A lot of Nigerians go to Canada now for various reasons. Now we have the man whose responsibility is it to look after Nigerian community in Canada and protect the interests of our country. I'm inviting to the Hard Talk the Nigerian High Commissioner to Canada, His Excellency Ade Ashekun. Please take your seat. You are the Nigerian High Commissioner to Canada. How long have you been on this?
First of all, I'd like to say good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. And I'd like to express my appreciation for your being so patient and waiting for the Vice President to come. He's on his way, he'll be here shortly, and I want you to understand that he hasn't been able to make it here because of matters of state, which are very compelling. But I'd like to appreciate you all. Having said that, I became the Nigerian High Commissioner to Canada in September 2017. It's been very rewarding, very fulfilling. I consider myself to be very fortunate because Nigerians in Canada are very professional, very accomplished, and very disciplined. And they very often receive all kinds of, they receive all kinds of awards, for different things. There's a Nigerian called Dr. Zemoya, who was the president of the Canadian Nuclear Society in 2016. He got a PhD from University of Benin. So Nigerians go out there, they distinguish themselves and they do well. So to that extent, I'm not the kind of person that has to deal with issues of our people getting into trouble. I mean, that's very rare. I usually have to go and attend where our people are being honored, giving out awards, make speeches, and so on and so forth. And so it's very good. It's a land of opportunity. It's a very interesting place. It's the second largest country in the world by landmass, second only to Russia. But it has a population of only 37 million people. So if you contrast that to Nigeria, which is the size of the state of Texas and Utah, with a population of close to 200 million people. So there's a bit of a contrast. Canada is a place that is trying to grow its population, and it welcomes people that are professional, that can come and contribute towards the development of their country. But I tell people that my job is to help people to get into Nigeria and not Canada. That's my job, is to help people get into Nigeria, not Canada. So all those messages I receive about how can we come to Canada, I try and manage them as best as I can. My major concern is the welfare of Nigerians living in that country. And I think so far God is helping us. Okay?
Yes. Clap for him in Canadian clap. Give him Canadian clap. Do you have any question for him? Did I hear you? Yes? Okay. Your Excellency.
Hi, good evening, sir. And thank you for telling us really nice things about what Nigerians are doing in Canada. However, I wanted to ask you what you are doing as a body of representatives to ensure that our citizens can actually access entry, not to emigrate, by the way. When we want to do business, to get visas sometimes is ridiculous. And they say to us that Nigerian high commissions everywhere in the world are very stressful places to go to. And therefore, there is a reciprocity of pain. Imagine if you want to go and do business as a professional, even in Morocco, as a Nigerian, it takes you 15 days to apply for a visa, to go there for 2 days. What exactly are you doing differently, and how are you going to ensure improvement in reciprocity for us to actually do well, those of us in Nigeria?
It's like she has attempted many visas, so you need to answer her question diligently.
Yes, I'm aware of what you're saying. The first thing I'd like to say is that the Nigerian High Commission in Canada is doing quite well in terms of people that want to come to Nigeria to do business. So anybody who wants to come and do business in Nigeria from Canada is guaranteed a visa within 48 hours. People that want to come on for official business from the Canadian government sometimes get their visa the next day. So what we are doing also is to make sure that there's reciprocity on the part of the Canadians. And what we have now is that we have a draft framework which both sides are looking at, in which both countries have stated what they require from each other in terms of processing time, in terms of the way citizens should be handled, a whole range of things. And I believe that process should be completed by the first quarter of this year. And within that, there will be stipulated time frames in which visas should be ready. Having said that, there are some things that people need to do to improve their chances of getting a Canadian visa. One of them is to apply online. If you submit a paper application, it is put at the bottom of the pile. They treat online applications much quicker. That's one. The second one is to give yourself adequate lead time. If you know you are traveling, try and submit your application quickly. Very often people are going to go on a trip and they submit their request late, and then everybody is under pressure. And Nigeria has more visa requests than any other country in Africa. So they have to even send out some of our requests to other countries to help in processing. The other thing is to make sure that whatever documentation you submit in support of your visa is authentic and is true. The minute you put in any document that has any element of untruth in it, the application is thrown out and you won't be able to apply for another 5 years. Those are some of the key things that I'd like you to bear in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Good evening, sir. My name is Ibrahim Moshino. My question is going to go straight to in terms of investments in Canada. I've been a banker, an investment banker. I've served with my good brother in the State Executive Council from Ogun State, and also a director of clinic investments. Nigerians living in Canada and Canadians living in Nigeria. I remember 2 years ago, before your assumption of office, to be precise, we've been working with the Canadian government on different side of investment in terms of renewable energy, SME, portfolio management, oil and gas sector in Canada. But what we notice mostly is that the Canadians, they are not exposed enough to come to Nigeria to do business with us. So we decided to form what we call Nigerian Canadian Business Communities, headed by the former ambassador, I think it's also Mr. Antonio. My question to you now at the assumption of office, what are your framework in attraction of Canadian business to Nigeria? I can tell you precisely that presently, Canadians are doing much more lesser than what Nigerians are doing in Canada. I agree with you, I listened to you attentively, that you said Nigerians are doing wonderfully well in Canada. But are Canadians doing wonderfully well in Nigeria? That's the point one. The second point is there is no way our High Commissioner in Canada or High Commission in Canada would not be invested in most of the transatlantic trade between Canada and the West Africa as a whole. And I've been in a summit in Ghana High Commission of Canada, where most of the Canadian investors precisely saying that they don't believe in us. They don't believe in Nigerians to do business. So most of the Canadian business are partly in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, in Senegal, Egypt, and etc. So I would like to know your plan in terms of SME attraction in oil and gas sector and transatlantic relationship between Nigeria and Canada at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a bit more like a lecture than a question, but I appreciate that. The first thing I'd like to point out is that Nigeria is Canada's largest trading partner in Africa, okay? That one is documented. But the point you've made, which is very valid, is that Canadians do not know much about Nigeria at all. And so one of the first things I did when I got into office was to begin to travel around the major business centers We'll continue this offline afterwards.
Well, thank you. Please give me a round of applause. Let us remind ourselves of the rules of engagement again. The VP will be in any moment from now. Please, for the last time, check your phones and be sure those phones are in silent mode or completely off. And if it's a Chinese phone, start putting it up now so that I can make all the noise now. Secondly, please avoid side talks when the program commences. Number 3, find somewhere to sit down. Number 4, start preparing hard questions for the Vice President. We have been waiting here for the last 3, 4, 5 hours. Now that the Vice President is here, this is the moment to engage him and ensure that every second we have invested waiting for him counts. And please, when you are going to ask the questions, don't thank him again. I have thanked him on your behalf. Don't talk of how beautiful this program is. We know it is beautiful. Just go straight. My name is Mr. Lagbaja Temedo. Mr. Vice President, I would like to know the program the government has in the areas of maternal mortality, if you like, or get child education, or broadening the space to allow more professionals to participate in the political process. Please begin to put your thoughts together. The Vice President is going to have some time. He's going to address us, and we are going to ask him questions. I am aware that this is 10:30, but that's fair enough. We are waiting for some hours. We must engage the Vice President and get the very best out of this engagement. I can see signals that the Vice President will enter any moment from now. And when he does, I request him to be upstanding, to honor his office, to honor his person. I will let you know as soon as that is imminent. What is important now is one more time, thank you for your patience. Apologize for the many hours you have had to wait for the arrival of His Excellency, the Vice President. And now to you, the arrival of His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemiosibajo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Grand Commander of the Order of Nigeria, GCON. Welcome, Mr. Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to this hard talk, an evening of interactive discourse between we take the national anthem now. The national anthem. Okay, together we take it. Arise, O compatriots, Nigeria's call obey, to serve our fatherland with love and strength and faith. The labor for heroes past shall never be in vain. To serve with heart and mind, nation bound, freedom, peace, and unity. Thank you. Please, you may resume your seat. No. Oh, that's... No, Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemiosibajo, SAN, before we proceed, may I request the Imam of Lekki Muslim community to please step forward and give us the opening prayers. I invite Imam Ridwan Jamil to give us the opening prayer.
مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Islam requires us to always pray for our leaders, whether they are good or bad. But Alhamdulillah, praise be to God. He has given us good and exemplary leaders in the persons of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, and also in the person of his indefatigable, amiable, loyal, committed, and intelligent vice, Professor Yemiosibajo. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to be with them. May Allah guide them. May Allah protect them. We especially thank Allah for what He has done in your life, Excellency, for rescuing you from what happened in the past. May God continue to protect you. It's your good works that Allah used to protect you. Continue with your good works to humanity and to the nation. May Allah be with you. Our leaders deserve our prayers always. Let us always pray for them. In the Quran, which is the final testament sent down by God to humanity, the last two chapters there are known as Al-Mu'awwidhatan. These two chapters are recited to seek protection. I'm going to recite the two of them as a means of approach to Allah, the true Lord and God, for our president and our vice president. May Allah continue to protect them. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
May Allah accept our prayers. Well, let me formally introduce and welcome His Excellency the Vice President and his entourage here today. As you know, we have been waiting for someone who has brought cerebral power to governance, who has demonstrated that professionals can participate in politics and make a difference, who has shown the nexus between faith and politics. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you a former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Lagos, whose tenure witnessed rapid development of the justice system in Lagos State and is doing something greater for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Join me in welcoming His Excellency the Vice President, Professor Yemiosibajo, SAN. Your Excellency, before you came, I have had to hold the Honorable Minister of Communication hostage. We promise not to release him until you have come. Now that you have come, let me formally introduce again the Honorable Minister of Communication, Barrister Ibrahim Adebayo Shitu. I also have here the Deputy Chief of Staff to the President, Mr. Ade Ikpaye. I hope the cause is here. His Excellency, the Nigerian High Commissioner to Canada, who has also given a very good account of himself and provided some glimpse into what the High Commission of Nigeria and Canada has been doing and giving us good tidings of the well-behaved nature of Nigerians in Canada. His Excellency Ambassador Ade Ashekun. The chairman of Federal Land Revenue Service a while ago also spoke to us about the need for all of us to pay our taxes, both individual and corporate taxes, to provide a fund to power the development of our great nation. I formally introduce to you Mr. Babatunde Fowler, Chairman of Federal Land Revenue Service. Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, the audience has been waiting for quite some few hours, but they promise to wait for you even if you come at 1 a.m. And I made a commitment on your behalf, and Mr. Vice President, please don't disgrace me. I said you are likely to give them trader money today. And that's why they waited. I made that commitment on your behalf. Please don't disgrace me, sir. But here, we have a number of Muslim organizations and Muslim professionals. And I'll just mention their names. We have Association of Muslim Professionals, AMP. We have the companion. The companion paid a courtesy visit to your Excellency about a few months ago. It's also an association of Muslims in business and the profession. We have the Criterion, which is the Association of Muslim Women in Business and Profession. We have Clear Path Islamic Center. We have Movement for Islamic Culture and Awareness. We have Muslim Bankers Association of Nigeria, the Muslim Congress, Muslim Media Practitioners Association, Muslim Teachers Association of Nigeria. They have come from all the states in Southwest. We have NOSFAT. We have Muslim Stock Brokers Association. We have Muslim Accountants. We have Lekki Muslim Woman that is playing host to us. We have Islamic Medical Doctors Association of Nigeria. And of course, those who work in the Temple of Justice, Muslim Lawyers Association of Nigeria. And in addition to all of this, we have the University of Ife, Muslim Graduate Association. Last but not the least, maybe the greatest of them all, the University of Lagos Muslim Alumni. Please clap for that now. You are not clapping for me, you are clapping for Vice President. He's an alcoholic. Mr. Vice President attended one of the most cosmopolitan universities. The Honorable Commissioner, Honorable Minister also attended a university in some rural place. At this point, Your Excellency, time is fast spent. What we do hope, Mr. Vice President, is that you kick this off in 2 segments. You deliver your short speech, and then we're going to have a whole night of interaction with you. And please, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President. Yes, Mr. Vice President said he's aware that you have prepared hard questions and he's also prepared for you. So he has asked me to address all the questions and he will now respond to all the questions in one go. So, and we can have these questions in 2 terms. He's seeking second term, so we'll take the first term questions and then we'll also take second term questions. So let me start with the Ibadan Muslim professionals. They have come from far, and I'm going to call Ajani Mobolaji to please step forward and ask the questions. And please, the rules of engagement is very simple. It's a question, I don't want a lecture. My name is so and so, and this is my question. Is that okay? Will you set a very good template? Okay, let's see whether you can do it.
My name is Mobolaji Ajani. Your Excellency, I'm going straight to the point. In the last 2 to 3 years, CBN BOI has disbursed close to 1.8 trillion naira as intervention fund. This connects to ease of doing business of the federal government, which we appreciate. However, the more the ease of the business, the more difficult for a Muslim to access this fund, because the fund comes with interest. So for the Muslim in the Southwest, no matter the billions of naira, we are unable to access, and this negates financial inclusion. How would you use your good office such that whenever we have intervention fund, it will be inclusive of Muslims to access this fund and will be able to have ease of business? Thank you.
Okay, you have done very well. People clap for you. Let me go to the health. And I'm going to invite Dr. Ahmad to please step forward. You can encourage him by clapping for him.
Mr. Vice President, sir. Assalamu alaikum, brothers. I hope you'll accommodate one or two more. It's important. My name is Saeed Ahmed. I'm in the Department of Surgery, Lagos State University Teaching Hospital, Lagos. My first question, Mr. Vice President. Nigeria has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world. I paint it clearly, Mr. Vice President. 1 of every 5 women who dies of childbirth-related events in the world is a Nigerian. I want to know specifically, what is the government doing? What does the government intend to do differently? Putting in mind that in the last 25 years, with all efforts combined, we have only been able to reduce this by just a few percentage. My second question, Mr. Vice President. Only a few weeks back, Mr. President presented the appropriation bill to the Senate, Joint House of Assembly. And it's of an immense amount, 8.8 something trillion naira. Sad, Mr. Vice President, sir, of these colossal amounts, only 361 billion was appropriated to health. Given that Nigeria has one of the lowest life expectancies, one of the not very robust health indices. In 2018, Mr. Vice President, 1% consolidated fund was allocated to health, amounting to about 55 billion.1. Till I stand before you, Mr. Vice President, this amount, not a single kobo, has been released. In the 2019 budget, another 51 billion has been earmarked. My question, Mr. Vice President, if we are to improve our health indices, if we are to reverse medical tourism, which is no longer restricted to the rich, going to India, Colombia, they go to places you cannot mention. If we are to improve maternal mortality rate, Mr. Vice President, sir, if we are to better the health, how do we intend to run a budget of less than 1/6 recommended by the WHO? Last one. Thank you. Last one. Mr. Vice President, sir, on the 21st of July, 2018, you visited Lagos specifically on account of the intractable gridlock that has invaded the 3rd tier of government in Lagos. I speak of the tanker and trailer government of Lagos State. which has invaded Apapa and its environs. A lot has been said on the economic implication of the shutdown of this environment. Mr. Vice President, sir, that time you gave a 72 hours ultimatum for the trailers and the tankers to be evacuated. This was partially done. What I want to know, Mr. Vice President, as I speak to you, if you saw any problem with that gridlock about 6 months ago, that problem has quadrupled. Now, emergencies cannot be attended to along that axis. People cannot access health. Health care givers cannot access their patients. People are dying without being able to come out of their homes. What are you doing about this? Thank you.
He asked too many questions that even the head of the microphone was impacted. Let me get to the women folk now. Alaja Surah Abmajid, 1 minute. No lecture, please.
Your Excellency, sir, my name is Surura Abdul Majid, a member of the Criterion Muslim Women in Business and Professions. Your Excellency, sir, the number of women in your government is too low. It is not acceptable by the Muslim women. Particularly, as I'm talking with you, we don't have a single Southwest female as a minister in that government. I stand to be corrected. So our request is that by this time next week, we are going out to support, by Saturday next week, we are going out to support your government, but with a request that you must give us commitment tonight that the percentage of women in your government is going to be higher, and Southwest Muslim females will be given adequate consideration. I thank you very much, sir.
You know, when a council is making a powerful submission, you wait to be sure that the judge has taken note of the statement. My Lord, did you capture what she said? Okay. So I proceed. From Muslim Public Affairs Center, MPAC.
Good evening, sir. Permit me to stand on existing protocol. I'm Ramat Egbeyemi from Muslim Public Affairs Center. I want to talk about or ask you a question on education. I say that changes in policy in this sector is too frequent. Going back and forth, this year we are doing 3444, next year is another thing, and education seems to be a vital sector for the economy and for the citizen. So frequency in policy changes in this sector does not augur well for the populace. And that we need a school where people learn, people interact, a place to mold future leaders. We want a school with good facility, good environment, good toilets, where water runs. So please make it one of your policy statements where the education policy is not frequently changed. Thank you.
And the last question, Mr. Vice President, this question is on politics, and it's written here. Mr. Vice President, what is your government doing to sanitize the political process and make it conducive for professionals to engage the political process in such a manner as to have many Osibajos in the cabinet? At this point, Mr. Vice President, I thought this is first set. I should take everything. I should take everything. Okay. Let me see.
My name is Suleiman Raji, retired General Manager, NNPC London office. Your Excellency, sir, Suleiman Raji, retired General Manager and Head of NNPC London office. Your Excellency, sir, I think we have a very high unemployment. To say we have a high unemployment is an understatement. And one of the greatest causes of the unemployment is insecurity. When companies perceive that a country is not safe, they take their industries elsewhere. And Ghana is undercutting Nigeria in many ways because they perceive Ghana to be safer than we are in this country. In Zamfara, I don't understand why we cannot secure Zamfara and Sokoto State where bandits run over and kill people at random. Please do something about security. And one last question, sir. Nigeria is the largest producer of yam in the world. 70 to 75% of yam produced in the world are gotten here from Nigeria. When I was in London, when we go to a market, specific market where they sell foreign goods, Nigerian yams are always dumped in a corner. Ghana, which produces far less, is the yam everybody buys. What are you going to do about thinking through the process of getting our products right before export so that they are not returned? Thank you very much.
One question here, Mr. Vice President. We keep hearing statistics every day about power generation, increase in power generation. Yet, Nigerians don't seem to have better power services. What is your response to this? Sorry.
Your Excellency, my name is Abdurrahman Balogun. I'm the National President of Muslim Media Practitioners of Nigeria. We have two short questions, sir. You recollect, exactly 4 years ago, you were in Ibadan. You had this similar meeting with us, where you debunked the insinuation that they said President Muhammad Buhari, if he becomes president, is going to Islamize Nigeria. You addressed us a lot on it. Now, it seems to us that we have two laws in the country. You discover that there's a separate law in the north and another one in the south. We have 2 court or 3 court judgments on the usage of hijab for our Muslim guests in Southwest here. And up till now, our guests are still being harassed, and then the government is not doing anything about it. Secondly, sir, as we equally notice non-inclusion of Muslim media practitioners in the government, especially in your team. And we want you to do something about that. I will expatiate more on it because my brother said I should not do lectures.
Let me take from the youth.
Good evening, Mr. Vice President. Salam alaikum, brothers and sisters. My name is Abimbola Ulu. And my question seems a bit personal. Should I go on? Okay, I heard about the anchor borrowing organized by the federal government. And I actually met somebody who seems an intermediary of the federal government. And I'm a radio broadcaster. I forgot to say that. So when he explained it to me, I felt it was a very laudable project. So I had to bring him on my program where he explained how there had been arrangements to involve people that are interested in farming in different areas, say fish farming, crop farming, and the government is willing to give them produce or chicken or fingerlings to start up with. And that these people need to go to the CBN, get a form or something and go to the bank and get registered. And I gave him like 1 hour, we deliberated on it. After the program, I gave out my number, people called. I received over 100 calls home and abroad. And I'm sorry, I really need the details because of my integrity. So that happened in November. These people had registered, and up till this moment, they've just been having meetings upon meetings. Some of them have had to pay between 10,000 and 25,000 naira to be integrated into the cooperation. And I think the last news I got from one of them is that they're setting up a microfinance bank that will help in the discharge of the funds. With due respect, sir, I would want a clarity on this, and my integrity and that of my station once again seems to be on the line on this. Thank you, sir.
I have seen many hands up. We can ask questions from now till tomorrow morning. Is it not better for Vice President to address 10 issues and we are satisfied with that? Or we want to keep asking more questions? It is up to you. Okay, I will take 3 more. No, let me take 3 more. Let me take our host before they switch off the lights. I will take 1 man, 1 woman.
I was going to warn you that I will switch off the light. My name is Labinjo. I'm the Vice President of Lekki Muslim Ummah. Your Excellency, Dr. Hamad asked a question about tankers and trailers. I just want to end it and put the final twist to it, that in 48 hours, those tankers were cleared off the bridge. When you came to Lagos, you gave an ultimatum. We know they were there until Wednesday, but in 48 hours, they were cleared, which means it is doable. So when you are going to answer the question, I want you to take that into account, why it wasn't done and why it was possible to get it done just in 48 hours. Now, the other point I wanted to make is a request. I will brief about it. I have documents which I can share with you. The Obalende praying ground where Muslims pray, where we observe Eid, that piece of land belongs to Lagos Muslim community. There are documents that says that very clearly. Now, when Gawan was head of state and he was in Dodan Barracks, he took over part of the place because of security and all that. And it got to a point where for every Eid, we have to apply to the Ministry of Defense for permission to observe Eid at that ground. Now, which means they can actually tell you 1 year you can't even observe it there, but it belongs to the Muslim community. We want to solicit your assistance. We have tried to ensure that this reverted to us. Now that the military is gone and they have moved to Abuja, that the remaining part of it, they've taken part of it for press center and all the rest and all that. But we still have a portion left. We don't want to be applying every year for permission to observe it at that place. We want your assistance to ensure that this reverts to us because it rightly belongs to the Muslim community of Lagos State. Thank you very much.
People are watching online and some questions are coming from those watching online, and I think it's fair enough to also give them some space. First question: a lot of Muslim female COP members are facing harassment due to the dressing. Mr. Vice President, what's your administration doing about this? The second question online, what is the administration doing about schools that have refused to allow Muslim females to wear hijab? The third and the last one, what is the sustainability and advising support as regard trader money scheme? Trader money scheme, sustainability and advisory support. Advisory support. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have asked at the last count about 15 questions. Even if you are preparing for final law exam, it will be more to up to 15 questions. Even if you want to do MBBS part 4, it will be up to 15 questions. I think what we need to focus on that this should not be a one-off engagement with Mr. Vice President. Therefore, let him give the opportunity of answering these questions, and then we'll have a scheme and a framework to engage him further. I so rule. Mr. Vice President, over to you. The mic is there. I changed my mind.
So I overrule the master of ceremony.
As your lordship pleases.
Let's have one more from the ladies.
You demanded for more participation on government. You have gotten it.
Good evening, Mr. Vice President. My name is Mutiatu Balogun, Executive Director, Hijab Rights Advocacy Initiative. I don't speak only for myself. I speak on behalf of the Muslim women of Nigeria. That's why I'm here tonight. There has been institutional discrimination against Muslim women. Apart from the fact that what Abraham Balogun has said about the court judgments that we have in favor of the hijab and provisions of the Constitution, saying we have the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, and the freedom not to be discriminated against. We have found out that there is concerted effort with the institutions to discriminate against Muslim women. Now, people register for their PVC. Our NGO had to go out. Our NGO had to go out to try to sensitize Muslim women on how they could register for their PVC. Because whenever they get to those centers, they will tell them it's either you remove your hijab or you don't register, or you have to remove your ears. Same with the issue of taking biometrics for international passports, for driver's license. Everywhere the Muslim woman is, she's being discriminated against. There is a circular since 2002 from the Nursing and Midwifery Council of Nigeria stating categorically that Muslim women could wear their hijab on their uniforms. Till today, School of Nursing Igodo, in the east, almost everywhere in Nigeria, except in the north, Muslim women that are passionate to be nurses, that are passionate to be lawyers, that want to contribute to their society, are being discriminated against just because they want to uphold their freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. So what are you, Vice President, as a professor of law?
Sorry,
yes, sir.
Just a moment. I'm just trying to understand the first example you gave of the discrimination. This is collecting PVCs, you said?
I'm saying registering for PVCs. I experienced it, yes, in registering for your PVC. I experienced it, and our NGO too was called upon several times that they had problem in registering for their PVC. Now, I know the federal government has regulation on biometrics that was gazetted, I think, as recently as 2012 or 2017, I think so, in the Federal Gazette, stating that when a woman wears hijab, you just need to see her forehead to her chin and the sides of her head. It's there. But I don't know if the workers are being they are being trained, or their sensibilities are being turned to it, that when a Muslim man comes with hijab, you don't ask her to remove it. Rather, you want to see just the whole face and take the biometrics. So this is what we are facing every day, and we are productive time that we are meant to use to contribute to our families, our societies, our profession, is being wasted needlessly to fight for the hijab every time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a bit too loud, I think. Okay, thank you very much. First, let me apologize for thank you. Okay, first let me say how very sorry I am that we had to keep you waiting for so many hours. We had an earlier engagement which overran. It was also a question and answer session, and quite a few people wanted to ask questions. So I'm really sorry about that, and I hope we'll be able to make up for a bit of the lost time. I'll just take the questions, and again, let me thank the organizers of the event, my friends who put together this event. I thought that the Muslim professionals had specific issues which might need to be addressed, and I thought it would be an important thing to address some of those issues. Let's just begin with a question by Mobolaji about difficulty in accessing funds, especially central bank intervention funds. What we have with the central bank at the moment is that every fund that is given as an intervention fund would follow normal banking rules, especially given source of funds. But the central bank also has a policy on Islamic banking, so that it is entirely possible, depending on how the funds are aggregated or how the funds are accessed, for such funds to be lent to those who do not want an interest regime, those who are opposed to an interest regime for reasons of their faith. But the bulk of central bank funds is funds that cannot be accessed without interest, for the simple reason that most of these funds are aggregated from, if you take, for example, the funds that are aggregated from sources that themselves have interest, an interest rate attached to it. So unless you have specific funds, and the central bank does have a policy on Islamic banking, unless you have specific funds that are devoted to Islamic banking, it will be very difficult to expect that the central bank will, just as a matter of policy, lend out money without interest, because that goes against its own, even its own rules and its own balance. That's why a separate policy on Islamic banking was introduced by the central bank under Sanusi Lamido, now Emir of Kano. So it is only where we have funds, for example, if the funds are brought in under that policy, that they can be lent out. So what you tend to find anyway is that the banks that already practice some strain of Islamic banking, such as Jais Bank and banks like that, are the ones that will be able to disburse those kinds of intervention funds. But the banks themselves may request from the central bank, they may request funds, as I'm saying, an Islamic bank can request funds from the central bank. Central bank will insist on its own parameters and insist on its own conditions, but they can then decide how they want to lend out the money under the CBN's Islamic banking policy. Sahid Ahmed wanted to know about the country that our country has the highest maternal mortality rate. What is government doing about that? First, let me quickly explain that both at the primary and the tertiary levels, medical care is state responsibility. Both at primary and tertiary levels, medical care is essentially the responsibility of a state, just as education. So you find that in many cases, of course, there's federal government intervention, I'll explain that. But in many cases, it is a state that we ought to question about its medical care, especially primary care. As a matter of fact, it's local governments that handle the primary health care. but states, it is part of the state's own general framework of responsibility, all the way up to even secondary health care. Many states have their own teaching hospitals. Of course, you have some federal teaching hospitals. But when you want to look at performance on such things as maternal mortality, of course, when you look at the figures, the World Bank figures or World Health Organization figures, they just do a country aggregate. What they do is they just do a country aggregate. But for us to better understand how to solve the problem, we must understand that it is first and foremost the responsibility of states to budget for primary health care and to ensure that primary health care is delivered to the populace. Now, what I do, I'm privileged to chair the National Economic Council, which is a meeting between the federal government and all the state governors every month. So we hold that meeting every month. Now, that meeting, I have occasion several times to look at the healthcare policies and outcomes in several states. Same as educational policy in several states and the outcomes. It is at such meetings that we're able to do almost a name and shame. So I can say, for example, this state, Ekiti State, for example, why is it that maternal mortality here is this high? Why is it that we're recording this or that? And the state may then, be held to account in one way or the other. When we look at the statistics, it's very obvious where the problems lie. The best that the federal government can do is to support such states. That's the best we can do, assuming we find that they have a problem. But generally speaking, this is really state responsibility. Now, when you look at the healthcare budget of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, for example, you notice that the healthcare budget is a federal budget. So when UNESCO says it expects a certain percentage, what we must do is to aggregate not just the federal budget, but also all the budgets of the states. That's how to calculate what is being spent on healthcare by a country. If you look at the federal budget alone, it is misleading. As a matter of fact, the federal budget only covers what is budgeted for the Federal Ministry of Health. It doesn't cover specialized agencies. So when you aggregate what specialized agencies are spending and you aggregate what the states are spending, then you get a more accurate account of what the government itself is spending. Now, the 1% of consolidated revenue from the Consolidated Revenue Fund, which we put into the healthcare budget, is in compliance with the Health Act. The Health Act specifies that you must have 1% of CRF. As a matter of fact, it was for the very first time that was done under this government in our 2018 budget, as you pointed out. But I do not agree with you that not a single penny of it has been released. The Minister of Health has not made such a complaint. In any event, the money is already appropriated. So the question is whether or not it should be spent or how it will be spent. It's already appropriated money, and we're still running that budget today. We're still running that same 2018 budget today. We have not started running the 2019 budget. As a matter of fact, the appropriation bill for the 2019 budget has just been sent. But I agree with you entirely that you cannot budget alone for health care. Budgets, no state government or federal government can budget for health care for 200 million people. That is the reason why we're suggesting the National Health Insurance Scheme as the surest way of aggregating enough resources to be able to take care of health care in Nigeria. Now, the steps we've taken so far on that National Health Insurance Scheme, because the reason why that is important, of course, is that this means that everybody will make a contribution towards health care, and we then aggregate the total amount of money. But the reason why that is so important is because, first of all, if you look at every one of our budgets so far, aggregating states and everything together, you still fall so many steps behind. And most people today pay for medical expenses out of pocket. So you really can't continue that way. So where we're at now is that we have a bill before the National Assembly to make national health insurance compulsory. We have a national health insurance already, but it's not compulsory. So the scheme is for government to pay 40% for those who are vulnerable and who are poor and cannot pay. And the remaining 60% is on a co-payment basis, so that government makes a slight contribution and everybody else who is on the scheme compulsorily also pays a sum. National health insurance is the surest way of ensuring that we're able to provide enough money to take care of our healthcare needs, to take care of funding for hospitals, to take care of payment, remuneration for doctors and all that. So that's the long-term plan for that. The Apapa gridlock, and what are we doing? And I think the additional question is, it was cleared in 48 hours. Let me explain very quickly that I think that I'll take the last question first. As a security measure, because of the president's visit, the trucks were moved to Festac. Of course, you know that the Festac people have already started complaining that there's a gridlock in Festac. So it's not in any way a permanent solution. So the people, of course, the trucks are going to come back invariably. But the solution, the real solution, and some of what we're trying to do, the Apapa port is a 34 million metric ton port. Now it's doing over 86 million metric tons. So it's far oversubscribed. So the only other thing to do is what we're doing now. We're dredging the Warri port as an alternative. We are start from, well, the Lagos-Kano rail, the Lagos-Abeokuta-Ibadan aspect of it was just commissioned. Well, we started test running yesterday. Already we are taking goods out of the ports by rail. So cargo is coming out of the ports by rail. It starts from the Apapa port. So that's one of the methods by which we want to decongest, to take cargo using rail. Because if you continue to use these trucks, I mean, of course, we have the same sorts of problems that we have. Secondly, we are using barges now. Barges have been licensed. Several barge owners have been licensed also to take cargo out of the ports. Then, one of the major problems is the infrastructure around the ports, the roads. And we have, of course, you know that we are now doing all the roads around the ports, both Dangote and flour mills. Dangote Construction is taking all of that, and they're doing it on a tax credit basis, so that they are investing almost 72 billion on that road project, and they're taking tax credit for it. So we expect that once we're able to complete that infrastructure, which shouldn't be too long from now, they've also opened the bridge area. So we think that things can move fairly quickly. We're also building 2 truck terminals on that same axis, side by side. We hope we had hoped that would have been completed as of the end of this month. But I think there have been some problems with that. But we hope that they'll complete it at least by next month. So at least we'll have one of those truck terminals open so that trucks can start parking there. But those are some of the steps that have been taken. By the way, we're also diverting to Calabar for the vessels that have a flatbed. So they can also berth at Calabar ports, so that's one of the other ways that we're trying to decongest. Sururat Abdul Majid said, in exchange for supporting us on Saturday, we must now ensure that there's at least one Southwest Muslim female. I am before pious men and women. I must not go and make a promise I cannot keep. So please spare me for making that promise. But let me assure you, though, that well, of course, until very recently, when, first, talking about females, Southwest females, or females generally, the Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, was female, although Christian. But Zainab is a Muslim, although northern Muslim. If you insist that this Muslim was a southwest Muslim, you know, it's getting a bit more complicated because you must now find, you know, but let me say though that really for me, I would rather that we had, you know, if we could, and I'm sure there's a good number of southwest Muslim women, but I can assure you that nobody sits down to say that the finance minister or a minister must be southwest female. That sort of thing doesn't happen. What happens is that a state, each state is entitled to a minister. So the governor and people in the state usually make recommendations. So the place to come from is really for a state government, southwest state governors. I think if you were to say to them, make sure that when you are recommending, you recommend, if you are recommending from Lagos, recommend a southwest Muslim or recommend. I think that pressure is better from there than from the federal government. So I think you should, I'll suggest that you do so. But really, I think that in truth, you know, there's no deliberate, and you can be sure there's no deliberate, there's no deliberate way of doing so. Somebody said, I think it was just to take that question all at once. Somebody said that there was no Muslim legal practitioner in my team. Of course you are wrong. My legal advisor, you know, and I'm a professor of law, so I really should not need a legal advisor. But because I need a legal advisor, I appointed a legal advisor. My legal advisor is Dr. Balkisu Saidu, who is very Muslim, and my second legal advisor is my chief of staff, who is a Muslim, a former Attorney General of Lagos State. So that accusation falls flat, and you must apologize to me for making that allegation. Okay, I think, yes, Ramat wanted to know about changes in policy, too frequent. I agree with you, especially educational policy. I think we need to be extremely careful about changes in educational policy. And I agree with you that that should not be too frequent, because really, you know, it has led to all sorts of distortions and hasn't been helpful at all. We have tried, though, to be as consistent as possible. We have not changed except for our new curriculum on science, technology, engineering, and maths, which we think is necessary because in order to enable our children to be able to compete, especially with 21st century jobs and all of those kinds of things, we need to take a second look at the policy on science, technology, engineering, and maths and arts, which is really the introduction that we're bringing in. But that, I believe, is absolutely necessary. Someone wanted to, I think it was, I'm not so sure who asked the question, I think it was one of the online questions, to sanitize politics to allow professionals to come into politics. I don't know how to sanitize politics, you know. I think it's an evolutionary process. It is evolving. We're doing the very best we can. Those of us who are professionals and those of us who are not career politicians, we definitely come into politics with a different perspective, and we do our best to try and change things and do things in a particular way. But I think that by and large, it's an evolutionary process. Politics does not have any bars. There's no threshold of any kind for entry. Anybody can enter and can come and join. So as you find a professor who is in politics, so you find a person who has absolutely no education whatsoever, but is nevertheless an authentic representative of his people, you know. So there's no threshold. And there you'll find, persons who are very wealthy, you'll find the very poor. Everybody is in politics. I think it's evolutionary. And I think that professionals should come into politics. I don't think you should wait until such a time as it is sanitized, I think that we should all be in it, and we should do our best to modify it as we go along. I agree with Mr. Raji about the issues around security. I think we can do a lot. I think we can do a lot more. But for me, long term, in terms of just, if we're not talking about, if we're talking about security, generally speaking, I think long term, one of the critical things is for us to be ready to accept the concept of the state police. Because really that's the only way to truly police a country of this size, especially a federation. This is a federation of almost 200 million people, and what you tend to find most of the time is that trying to control policing from Abuja or from one central point, wherever that may be, is always going to be counterproductive and is never going to really work effectively. Because what you need is that you need to have a policeman who is familiar with his community. And, you find sometimes that a policeman who is transferred from Ebonyi State to Zamfara State, how can he doesn't even understand the language. So even if they are conspiring against him to kill him, he won't even know. But that's why policing everywhere is local, and it just has to be local. That's why the state police is possibly the long-term option. But in the meantime, what we're trying to do is to ensure that we keep reforming the police. The current Inspector General of Police, the acting Inspector General, one of the reasons why he was picked is because of his focus on community policing and his experience in community policing. So we expect that we can do a lot more with the current Inspector General of Police, especially with looking at how to collaborate with, at the state level and at the local government level to really diffuse this or devolve the authority of the police to those levels. But security remains a primary concern for us. But never worry about Ghana. People keep talking about Ghana undercutting Nigeria. Well, Ghana is compared to us, Ghana is a very little country, very, very small country. And if you look at just to give an example, the bank, one of the big banks in Ghana is Zenith Bank, one of our banks. And Zenith Bank will tell you that their whole operation in Ghana, all the money they make, can't equal their Apapa branch. Just to give you a sense. Sometimes I think we get carried away with these comparisons with these relatively small countries. One day somebody was telling me about Rwanda. Rwanda is doing, I said, look, Rwanda, Lagos is 6 times the economy of Rwanda. Lagos, and that's just one state. So I think that they might be better able to manage. But if the point is that there are good examples, good things that are going on there, great. But you must also recognize that many of them operate unitary states. They are completely unitary. So in our case, we have states that are autonomous, almost autonomous. You can't tell it, I can't go and arrest the state governor. For example, he has immunity and all of that. In any event, I can't even dictate to him how he spends the money that is allocated to him. So we have a more complex system. Ours is a federal system of, by and large, autonomous states. So it's a bit more complicated. Talking about yams, and Ghanaian yams and Nigerian yams, because we're doing quite a bit of work on that. The Nigerian Export Promotion Council is working with so many who are exporting yams. But what we found with this yam thing was that a lot of the so-called Ghanaian yam is actually Nigerian yam that is labeled as Ghanaian yam. And that's what our NEPC people found, because we export a lot of yam. What happened was that when Nigerians, the Ghanaian yams were initially being accepted, and everybody has accepted Ghanaian yams, but we were not exporting a lot of yams. So a lot of Nigerians who were exporting yams were also labeling their own as Ghanaian because they didn't need any special clearance since the Ghanaian yams had been exported before. So now we're much more aggressive about selling our own yams all across the world, and the NEPC has been working with so many of these yam exporters. So I think very soon you don't just wait and see. You'll see that Nigerian yams will be practically everywhere, and they would have to be begging us to stop sending our yams. Power generation, we need, yes, I agree with you entirely about power generation, that obviously we need to improve power generation. But what has happened is, of course, that we've improved generation generally. We've also done a lot of work on transmission. But the main difficulty remains with distribution. You know, of course, that in 2005, a lot of the companies were privatized. You know, NEPA was privatized, and, several discos and gencos took over. Many of these discos, especially the discos, simply had thought that this was going to be like the telcos, where they made money very quickly. But as it turned out, the power just doesn't work quite that way. So many of them were highly leveraged, they borrowed a lot of money, and were unable to provide the assets that were required. So many can't even provide transformers. Many are not able to provide even metering, just to meter homes. So they send a lot of estimated bills and all of that. And of course, this has shown that they are really unable to provide the services that they claim that they should be providing. Let's just put it that way. Of course, they are making a great deal of effort. Government also has several faults with respect to that process. But what we've decided to do is what is called the Eligible Customer Declaration. The Minister of Power, Works and Housing issued that declaration mid last year. What that does is that it allows us to work on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. So we are licensing private companies now that can provide power for captive areas. So for example, if you say, I can provide power for Lekki, we'll license you to provide the power for Lekki. That's the long and short. So that we can have individual power companies providing and distributing power for different segments of the populace. Now that, of course, was resisted by the discos because many of them felt that they had exclusive authority over territory. But we made the point that first, that does not appear in the agreements, but secondly, also, they too can participate with different companies on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. But we are convinced that we cannot use the national grid as the sole source of provision of power for the entire country. We have to decentralize and allow several companies to generate and distribute power. We've done quite a bit of that in Surah Market, for example, in Ikmori Market. These are private companies that are distributing power there. We've also done in Araria Market, in Aba, Sabongari, and all of that. We've been doing this in markets because a lot of the private companies obviously want a place where they are sure that they'll be able to get their money, on a, negotiated basis. But we think that going forward, that is the solution that we're prescribing, namely decentralizing and having smaller grids so that people can supply power all across the country. Abdul Rahman Balogun, 2 judgments on the use of hijab, government not doing anything. Let me say very straight away that government will not interfere at all in the matter of whether people should wear headgear or not, for the simple reason that these are matters that have already been contested in court. The only way that we can resolve a matter outside of court is by legislation. Once there's controversy, it's by legislation, state by state legislation, because you can't even pass national legislation on the wearing of any item of clothing. What I would say is that already the matter is before the Court of Appeal. So, if the Court of Appeal, whichever way it decides, it can then go, if it's going to be appealed, to the Supreme Court. But in other countries of the world, that's what has happened. What has happened is that they've gone through the court process, and the court process has decided one way or the other because it's controversial. Alternative is legislation. And I think that it's possible for there to be sufficient lobbying at the state House of Assembly level to persuade legislators to pass laws that you think would not be discriminative against Muslim girls or Muslim women who want to wear their hijab. So I think that that's the way to go. But no government can simply say, we now, especially when the matter is already being a subject of a court, of a court order. And in any event, the way to go is either to wait for the courts or to go by way of legislation of the House of Assembly. The question about discrimination is one, I think, that we really have to follow through a bit, because really a lot of it might have to do with ignorance, even where you make the point to them. They may just be completely ignorant about what the rules are and what the regulations are. And in many, many cases, the reason why rights are infringed, generally speaking, it's either because people just expect that there will be no consequence or that they are ignorant about it. So I think it's a point that we ought to take up, and make formal reports. I would suggest that you make a formal report to the Minister of Internal Affairs. And we can also help out with, if you are going to make a formal report, so that if these are agencies under the Ministry of Internal Affairs, then they send them the regulations and let them know that they can't carry on, they've got to comply with what the rules are. They can't carry on in a manner that discriminates against women, against Muslim women or women who want to wear their hijab and still be certificated in whatever way that they wish. That is, okay, anchor borrowers. What I'm going to suggest, I think we should take this anchor borrowers thing offline. I'd like you to have I'd like to understand it fully, because I can't understand the agency aspect of it. I really can't understand that. That somebody comes and says they're an agent. I'd really like to better get a feel of that. But I'm going to have Dr. Dikwe Olu, who is the economic advisor to the president, take a look at it with you offline so that you can have a full. But I know that with anchor borrowers, there's no agency. I've never heard of somebody coming and saying, I'm an agent, pay money for a cooperative. Certainly not. So, but I'm sure that if you have the discussion with him, it will be helpful. Okay, land for Eid, how can we get it back? I'm not certain, Mr. Labinjo, I'm not certain whether this is, at the moment, is this state land? Is it regarded as state land? Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes. But today, who supervises it today? Okay. 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 But I think what we could do with respect to that is to really find out from the Ministry of Defense and also the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, because he is generally in charge of federal land in the states. So I think we could find out what exactly is going on. And then if there's a way of getting them to grant some kind of use whenever you want to use it or whatever, I think we could look at that. Okay. No, since you are here, Yes. Yes. No, wait. I don't have such authority. I cannot, if I could, I would have reverted several lands here and there. I don't have such authority. But what I think we could do, and this is really the point, I think that the minister, and I think it's a good thing that PRF is also the minister, because he's in control of federal lands. Yeah, I mean, that's not a problem. Any land, any federal land is under the minister. So it will really be a matter of the minister. We could follow that up. It's a matter of the minister talking to his counterpart in defense to resolve whatever problems there are. Since he is already familiar with the issues and he was Lagos State Governor, I think it's much easier for him to handle that. We can look at that with him, but certainly I have no authority to just, as it were, otherwise I'd have willed some also to myself. Okay, trader money, sustainability and advisory support. Let me say first that trader money is very sustainable. And for those who do not know what trader money is, although it has become very popular, especially since people have accused me of going around the market sharing money to market women and all of that. But let me very quickly just explain what it is. First, it's a microcredit scheme run by the Bank of Industry. And what the Bank of Industry does is that it begins by enumerating petty traders. These have to be petty traders. Most of them, their inventory is no more than 2,000 naira, 3,000 naira. I mean, the plantain seller has a tray, you know, the pomo seller in a bucket, you know, just petty traders. Now, when they are enumerated, they take all their details, photographs, everything. That is sent to the back end in BOI. They are then given the loan. The loan is sent to them on their phones, right? And then they can cash out from any source, but the loan is sent by a credit alert from their phones. When they spend that money, of course, they are supposed to use it to improve their inventory and all that. They are given 15,000 once they pay back. And once they pay that back, it's automatic on their phones. Once they pay that back, they get 20,000. Once they pay back 25, all the way to 100,000. Now, the reason why this is so important is because we talk a lot about taking poor people out of poverty. We talk a lot about how to do it. But these models have worked in other places. This particular model is one that has worked both in India and Bangladesh. This model that we're using, this trader money thing. And we find that these traders, these petty traders, are the highest number of people in that commercial value chain doing informal trade all over the place. And we find that giving them just 10,000 naira, 15 and all of that is so helpful to their inventory, so helpful to what they do. I think somebody fell asleep and fell. Okay. I hope it's settled down. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So I was saying about the trader money. So we think that this is a very effective way of getting several of these petty traders to improve the quality of what they do, and also to make more money for themselves. And I think it is sustainable. At the moment, we're spending on 2 million petty traders. The total amount of money for that particular program is 20 billion, and that's for 2 million. And if you look at, this question about sustainability, I believe is always asked when we have social programs that benefit large numbers of people, especially very poor people. And I had this argument with people who are in our economic team, because some people also had raised this question. But I answered by saying that in this same country, in 2009, 2010, when 300 Nigerians owed the banks so much that 5 of the banks nearly collapsed, in order to bail out these 300 Nigerians and of course bail out the banks, 5.7 trillion naira was spent just to bail them out. Today, our entire budget is 8.6, 8.7 trillion. But when it was time to bail out 300 Nigerians, basically, we spent 5.7 trillion, 2010 money. So today, when we're talking about 20 billion for traders, 2 million traders, people now ask, is it sustainable? When 5.7 trillion was being spent on some 300 rich people, nobody asked the question whether it's sustainable. It's only when you want to do something for very poor people that people suddenly remember that, there's something like that. I think it's entirely sustainable. I think it depends on your economic philosophy. It depends on where you're coming from. I believe very strongly that the way to get people out of poverty first is to get cash in their hands somehow, train them, financial training, and I think this is the sort of thing that the questioner had in mind, that, what is the advisory support? What we hope to do, because the financial inclusion scheme as well, what we hope to do is that we'll open bank accounts for them, expose them to other financial products, insurance, health insurance, general insurance and all of that, so that they can find something, so that they too can, be better educated, better informed, and have access to better financial products. So that's on trader money. I think those are the questions that have been asked. Yes, I think those are the main questions that have been asked. Thank you.
I'm sure we can do better than that. Our nation is blessed with a vice president that will hold his own anywhere, anytime, including the United Nations. If you believe the vice president, Professor HardTalkwithProfYemiOsibajo, has done a wonderful job, give him a round of applause and let it be reflected in the villa. Your Excellency, thank you so much. The only job left, we will have loved to take more, but it's almost 12 midnight. And we need to recognize that a lot of people have traveled from far distances to be here, and we don't want to endanger their lives. The VP is ready to take more questions till morning, but moderation is the pearl of everything. So we're going to call it a quits now. The only thing left is to invite one of us to move a vote of thanks, and I'm going to invite Imam Najim Jumal to please step forward and thank the Vice President and his entourage, and of course, our audience who have been very wonderful, even when sometimes they make some little hisses.
Your Excellencies, brothers and sisters in Islam, the Prophet said, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that man lam yashkurun nas, lam yashkurillah, that whoever does not thank the people will not thank Allah. On behalf of the Board of Trustees of LEMO, the Excellency is otherwise engaged right now, I'm told. I'm told there is a presentation, a gift.
Good evening, Your Excellency. I will not be wrong if I say that the gifts that you would probably value most at this point are our votes. From all indications, from what has happened here to, since afternoon, you can be rest assured that we are with this government, and inshallah, you will have our votes and have the votes of most of our members, in the different organizations. So that you, but we will be failing in our duty if we don't give you a copy of the greatest message that God has sent to humanity, and that is the Quran. So we have two special Quran here, as well as other literatures, that explain about Islam. Being a professor, I'm sure you would take time to go through these documents. But most importantly, the Quran. We have two copies. This special Quran contains information about the emergence of the various chapters of the Quran. So you are not just reading the message, you're also reading about what were the things that happened before Allah, sent down these verses. It's a special type of Quran for special people. So in order to show our appreciation, and we would like you to send a message to Mr. President also that the Muslim community is 4x4. Muslim professionals are behind you. We are praying, inshallah, you would win, and then people would enjoy the dividends, more dividends of democracy. On behalf of Muslim professionals in Nigeria,
on behalf of the Board of Trustees of Lekki Muslim Ummah, custodians of the Lekki Central Mosque, I extend our gratitude to His Excellency, the Vice President, for considering us worthy of hosting this event on behalf of Muslim professionals across Nigeria. We thank you very much, sir. Your Excellency, Minister of Communication, our own Haji Bayo Shitu, we thank you very much, sir. Your Excellency to be Organizer General, our brother, part of us Muslim professional, we thank you very much. Former Deputy Chief of Staff to His Excellency, Governor Amosu, and current President, University of Lagos Muslim Alumni, we thank you very much. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for the patience, thanks for the endurance, thanks for considering this worthy of your time. May Allah reward you all abundantly. Amen. Subhanaka Allahumma abihamdik. Ashhadu an la. Brothers, I'm sure you would let His Excellency make his exit before you rush for that door. Subhanaka Allahumma abihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Group photograph.